Welcome you bags of flesh. Are you ready to embrace the future and ditch your fleshy forms? Good. Due to popular demand, by 3 people, but let us not ruin a good thing with facts. To see my Foggernauts build I decided to make this. I want to call it a guide, but in all honesty, it is just me gushing about robo-waifus for a few minutes. Anyways, strap in folks, part 1. Bit of background if you're new here or played before the revamp and stumbled here randomly. Foggernauts were whacked by nerf hammer and relatively speaking hard. Now, this does not mean the class is not viable or dead, sure it got nerfed, but let us be 100% honest here. We all know why dear old Ankama bonked us. The class was beyond broken, and combined with other resistance debuffs it was just massively stupid at times. In my honest opinion, while Fogger is weaker than it used to be, it's now a lot more fun, due to new spells, passives, and gameplay styles other than being very far away and casting Hearth of Steam till you no longer had the number 1 key. That being said, now watch as I present to you a ranged Foggernaut build that focuses mostly on using 2 spells. Hey, it's 1 button more, and sometimes I can press a few more buttons. Part 2, now I kid OFC. While my build does focus on ranged gameplay, I wouldn't class it ranged DPS, more of a pain in the goddamn arse or a saboteur. Yes, I have read the class description, and yes, I did take some major influence from there. Now let me explain. My build has a very simple goal. I don't want to die, ever. And if I am to die, I prefer to be the last one standing. Sure, we all die, but to my petty and shallow self, that counts as a victory. How do I achieve this? Through the combination of stupidly high MP, sublimations that will heal me slowly over time, and Foggernaut's spell kit that at times just feels a bit unreasonable. Foggernauts can generate shields, while still causing some major damage, buff resistance, raise block just any number you can think of, reduce the enemy damage done, absorb damage done to us by placing blockades, or just moving so far away that even Craw might have to squint their eyes to locate us. Fogger can be a bit wild, is what I'm saying. Now heads up before I dive into the meat and bones of this build. This is not the mainstream build. It is mostly for soloing stuff and surviving. It can be used at group play, and it does a decent job. But in no way is this build utilizing the maximum damage output that Foggernaut can do. Alright, part. I forgot what part we were on. Let's talk stat points. Note that when building any class, always take into account the gear you are using. Don't just follow stat build blindly. That being said, here's what I took. Int, max resistance, and place the rest to HP. Why? Foggernaut can generate shields easily and often. While natural shields are nice, there's exactly no need to get them with stat points. Just focus on a larger HP pool, STR, single target damage maxed, and rest to elemental. In here you stat however you want. But I went with this because I like to stay somewhat relevant in melee combat if enforced there. Ideally I won't be, but sometimes you F up. Optionally you can stat to STD and ranged maxed and rest to elemental, which would give you higher damage output, but make you useless at melee, agi, force of will. All of it. Sure, Foggernaut can't cause status effects that benefit from this. Well, we do have Stomp with its -3 MP effect, but that is 1 spell and hardly justifies this. But it's good to remember that it also protects you from debuff spells targeting MP or AP, and as a bonus, you can pretty much just ignore the edge tiles, rest to dodge or lock, or a combination of the two. I went with lock/dodge combination stat, for no other reason than it's relatively handy to lock your targets at times. Tip: you can use the water spell Evaporation at 6 LVS of overheating to gain 6 levels of high pressure to trigger a passive and gain 20 force of will, especially handy in PvP against Zealers, Fortune, critical hits max, and Berserk damage. This will eventually change and be replaced by critical damage, but for now, I have Berserk due to sublimations. Consulting gear here is smart since you might not need or want critical hits here. Plenty of gear having critical hit limitations and whatnot, and Foggernaut can decide how many critical hits one has middle of the fight anyways. Major, AP, MP, DMG done and damage taken reduced. You might recall my build plays from a distance, so why didn't I take +1 range instead? Simple. You won't need it. Foggernaut's class passive gives you +3, and you will almost certainly gain 1 to 3 from the gear you use, so the extra range can be useful, but you'd be better served by the reduction and the damage done majors. Now that we have stats sorted out, it's time for the fun part. I think we're at 4? Spells and abilities. I will list the spells I use and give the reasons why I took them. Current, key spell. You more or less have to have this. It's cheap and can be combined with basically any spell combinations, but the reason why you should have this is simple. Using this spell you steal critical hits or block, depending on whether you attack from range or in melee. 10% critical hits for a turn, just by using 2 AP? And doing some damage? Yes please. You will use this spell to control your critical hit chance. Or if you end up in the melee and need to tank some hits you can raise your block, Pummel, my favorite spell, and bread and butter of my build. You'll use this spell in combination with Current, or Bombardment. 2x Pummel will do decent damage, but it will also give you armor. By playing defensively from a distance, and by not taking too much damage, you will in a couple of turns build stupid amounts of armor. This spell can also be used to save an ally by sacrificing high pressure. You can bonk your low HP ally to give them a shield, and the best part, you'll also still gain the shield. Tip: you can blockade plus pummel a target for extra safety. If you have no high pressure, you can evaporation plus blockade plus pummel for a stronger blockade and shields. Since evaporation also refunds 3 AP, you can also stabilize your blockade or the target you are protecting for extra safety. Evaporation, panic movement spell, but mainly used to manipulate your class passive. It can change the class passive stacks to their opposite ones, and by using this to manipulate, it will refund 3 AP, making it cost 1 AP. Remember, though, only 1 cast per turn. Charring, fire damage spell. If you have low fire damage, you might want to use stasification. I have next no fire percent, so am more or less forced to use stasification. When using this, use to bully targets that are too far away that Pummel can't reach them. This does have higher DMG and lower AP cost. It does deal a small amount of damage back to you. Tip: combine Current 2x if you can, and then cast 2x Charring for 20% crits and efficient AP use. Furnace: if you really want someone to be removed from the gene pool, cast this. Honestly, this spell feels like a war crime. Not only does it have an unreasonable damage of 161, but for every overheating, it will gain an extra 16, and since your overheat maxes at 6 stacks, and with stasified active, just yikes. It also has utility. By sacrificing that extra damage, you can cause uncurable up to 60%. This effect can be extremely useful, especially in dungeons. Dissolution, not my most used spell, but you can use this to lower the damage that enemy is doing. Casting this at the boss can be worthwhile. 15% less DMG is nothing to sneeze at, but if I'm being honest, I use this mostly at PvP, to piss off players that relay heavily in their Wakfu points. Yes, I am that one fucker who will use Dissolution and bank you with a Bonta blade, for no other reason than it's funny to see someone lose 2 Wakfu points per turn. Thank you for asking. Bombardment Utility spell. Mostly, a self-cast will give you a major boost at lock and dodge and +1 range, and it is castable on allies. Can also be used as a filler instead of Current. This will also add 1 stack up to 5 that will raise the DMG this spell does for every cast. Tip: Bombardment plus Current plus 2x Charring is good combination. Alright, that's all the elemental spells. Now let's move to active abilities. Blockade, take it. This is not even remotely optional. This has way too much use. It will eat all DMG around 3x cells to any ally that it is inside those cells. You can help your tank, save your ally from a tough spot, or just negate some damage you don't want to take. Extremely useful at rifts. Stasis Flux, panic button, used to unfuck you from the situation when mob or mobs get too close. It has no cast limit, but it will double in price every time used in the same turn. Casting this 2x will give you 4 extra MP for that turn. And when you already have 8, you can pull out some broken kiting maneuvers with this, though it will eat your Wakfu pool. Ironclad, panic button number 2, when you can't for one reason or another move to safety, or the enemy is using high power ranged attack, this will give you 100 more resistance and remove 2 range points for the duration of this ability. Best when combined with blockade and pummel. Tip: use bombardment to negate the plus range if needed. Stronghold, stabilization ability. Because sometimes you need stuff not to teleport around, can be used to any object, enemy, ally, yourself, blockade the bone, etc. Tip: in Moon Island Rift, casting this before killing the mobs that go invisible after taking X amount of damage, the mob won't teleport to a random cell, because it can't, so you can just attack the cell it was last in. Microbot/stomp, change depending on need. If you know you will need rails, take it, otherwise it's better to carry stomp for the -3 MP. Microbot is a strong ability, but in my opinion, it's a bit restrictive. Since a lot of things can block the rails, it's just an annoyance a lot of the time. Up next, passives. Energy Moderator, 20% damage, but stasified enemies no longer give you Wakfu points when they stop paying taxes. My playstyle is not that Wakfu heavy, so I happily do this trade. Sure, you generate less Wakfu overall, but the 20% is worth it, and I do compensate it with stationary immobility at the start of the fight. If you have more than 6 Wakfu, you rake in 1 per turn, but in exchange, you can place 1 microbot less. Since I barely ever use microbots and aim to keep my Wakfu cap at 7 anyways, this keeps my Wakfu Reagan alive and lets me keep the 20% damage buff from the moderator. Carnage, 15% more damage and 10% to targets with armor, but your heal spells lose 30% of their effects. Well, I'm a Foggernaut, am not exactly famed for my bedside manners, and as far I'm aware it won't affect my sublimation's stasis reservoir at the start of the turn. 4% for non-stasis damage and 3% for stasis damage per Wakfu point. Since I aim to conserve my Wakfu anyways, it is a nice boost for my DMG since you get 1 Wakfu per turn guaranteed. With stationary immobility, there's no reason to not have this. Limiter removal. You need to have this. It's not even funny how damn good this one is. You get 1 Wakfu, which will automatically fulfill conditions for stationary immobility, but it also gives you buffs when you reach max stack at ether overheating or high pressure. You get 20% willpower or 1 AP. Both are extremely useful since I mostly play at the range most of the time. I have the 1 AP, which I don't all honestly need, but if you decide to use some unorthodox sublimation, this can be just stupidly fun. Looking at you, yes, sublimation gives 2 AP on odd turns if you use a Wakfu point, but on even turns it will take 2 AP if you use a Wakfu point. It forces you into a cycle. 2 from is you can pummel 3 times. But the upside with 13 AP plus 2 from is you can pummel 3 times in a turn, which just feels like a war crime. Light alloy, 1 plus 2 MP, but you have 20% less HP. Since I'm not planning to get hit in the first place and have 101 ways to deal with incoming damage, I don't mind the downside and just see it as 1 free MP. Final part, and finally, sublimations. I currently use the following. Heartbreaking Blood, mostly use this for the extra damage. It does have a nasty side effect, but I'm using 3 sublimations to compensate for this. Unraveling, if I'm being honest, this is complete filler sublimation. It converts your critical hit damage into elemental damage at the rate of 1 to 2. Social Relations, gives 6% more damage depending on the turn and what side you attack from. Critical Hit Expert 2x, one of the sublimations to balance HBB. If I crit on a turn it will heal me at the end of that turn around 6% of damage done. I'm using 2 of these. Sweetness, plus 1 MP, but you do 10% less damage. The downside is kinda hefty, but having that plus 1 MP is worth it in my personal opinion, though your mileage may vary. Wakfu Influence, when you start your turn at max Wakfu, you gain 20% critical hits. My base critical hits are relatively low at under 40%, but with this and current plus other sublimations in practice I will have a 100% crit rate. Solidity, undervalued by everyone, but I personally love this one. Once per turn, if you take a hit that hits harder than X value it will soften that attack. It's basically guaranteed block for hard hits, but only once per turn. Berserk Critical, gain 10% critical hits if you fall under 50% HP. This helps me to keep the critical hits up if I fall low HP. And Precaution, now I love this one. If I fall to 50% it will heal me 10% per turn. Why do I love this? At the start, I mentioned my build centers around surviving, but that does not mean I won't ever go below 50% HP, and with this, you can slowly heal back to 50% and then use Critical Hit Expert to heal some more. The Blockade, Pummel, and just by running away I can recover from nearly anything. Highly useful in rifts, for example, where the maps are large and favor ranged fighting. I didn't mention gear in this guide, but that's because that's a way too large of a can of worms to open due to the mind-bending size of options available. TLDR, the build is slow to ramp up, but if given the time and the map allows it can survive practically anything, making this, in my opinion, a good build for soloing rifts or other content. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments.